Hello and welcome to this Alabama adventure. Tonight we take a trip to Chambers County. We go back into our ghost files, and in Chambers County there's another house down there that I want to tell you about that's haunted. It's in White Plains, Alabama. Hello and welcome to Fright Night. You know, the dictionary defines the word ghost as a disembodied soul, a soul of a departed person that is believed to live in the unseen world. Since the beginning of time, men and women have told stories of ghostly encounters, strange happenings, unexplained sounds, and things that go bump in the night. Many reliable people claim to have encountered the departed. Now tonight's ghost story will be coming from a little community in Chambers County called White Plains. Let's run down there real quick so I can show you where this haunted house is. It's right next to where the old White Plains Country Fair used to be held every year, but I believe they have changed the location on the fair this year or recently. Now here we are coming into downtown White Plains, Alabama, and this is where the White Plains Country Fair takes place every year. And when you get here, you'll get into this curve, and you'll make a left turn onto this road here. Look like County Road 162. And this particular road here took you out. I'm not sure if they still have the country fair down here or not, but anyway, if they do, this is the little road you went out here to the lake and to the fairground. And right here is where you went through those two gates, and that was the fairgrounds where the White Plains Country Fair was held every year. All out in there behind that little grove of pine trees you see was where the vendors set up. And I'm going to carry you right on down here and show you this haunted house. It's just right on down this little road. Now then, the tale of this house comes from two people that I have known very well. They are very good friends of mine over the years, and here's the story on this old house. I'm going to use some made up names so people won't recognize exactly who lived here and who had the ghostly encounter. So I'm just going to use fake names on this particular ghost story. These two people that owned this house weren't married at the time, but they worked pretty close together, and they got to seeing each other and dating, and over a period of time they did get married, and they needed a place to live. And about that time, this house came up for sale. It was a house that the woman in the story had lived in, I believe, previous whenever she was a small girl. But right now, her father lived in the house next door, and this house was up for sale. So after they got married, they decided that they would buy it. And they really didn't notice anything to begin with. The only thing about it, they did know a little history on the house. It was not painted like it is now. As a matter of fact, the old house had gone a long time without being painted, and that was one thing that they planned to do, was to restore the house, and in which they did while they lived there a great deal. Anyway, as the story begins, nothing much happened to begin with. The lady, who I'm going to call Jean, said she could be in the house alone sometimes, like cleaning or cooking or doing whatever she needed to do, and she just felt as if she was being watched sometimes. And then her husband, who I'm going to call Big John, he said he got to feeling the same way. He just always felt like there was a presence around and somebody was watching close, and but they hadn't seen anything and they hadn't heard anything. Then after they lived there a while and they began doing some remodeling, every night whenever they would start to go to bed, they would make sure that the windows were locked, and of course the doors were shut and locked at night, because the house is kind of out in the country. Then it began being, after they would go to bed, they would, if one of them happened to get up during the night or something and go like into the kitchen to maybe get something to drink or something to eat, the back door would be standing wide open. And several times Big John said after this began happening, like when he started to go to bed at night, he said sometimes he would make 3 or 4 rounds over the house checking the windows and doors, and sometimes when they would get up, the doors would be open. And I'm going to tell you a little something else about that later on, something that happened to me down there one time. But anyway, little things like this happened. The windows would be open sometimes, always the doors, and of course the windows had latches and locks on them, and the doors did too. And when they would get up, a lot of times the next morning, like if they slept sound all night, the next morning when they got up getting ready to go to work, all the windows and the doors and things like that would be open in the house. But they kind of didn't pay a lot of attention to it to begin with. But a little history on the house is when they moved in, 13 people had actually died inside that house. And there was one room in there to where many years ago, whenever you died, we weren't left in the funeral home. The family brought you back home for that one last visit, or whatever the reason was. But I can remember bringing my grandparents home back in the 1960s and 70s whenever they passed away. It was just something that was done back then. And there's one particular room in this house that when you walk along the wall and put your hand on the wall and walk down, you can feel a change in temperature at the location to where the caskets were left and the corpses were laid out for viewing. Was the place where the caskets were always placed up against the wall, and you can actually walk down this wall in this room, and you can feel a change in temperature in your hand as you walk down the side of the hall. Over time, the ghost or whatever in the house began to get a little more noticeable. There was several times, as I said, that Jean would be doing something and she just said she just felt like somebody was watching her, like there was a presence there. They hadn't seen anything or anybody up until one night, and Jean was in the kitchen washing dishes and getting supper put away and that type of stuff. And John had already got through with doing whatever he was doing, and he was sitting down watching a TV show. He was sitting in the living room, and as you were sitting in the living room, just off to your left was a doorway that went into a little hallway where the front door was. Well, he was sitting there watching TV, and it was kind of cool weather, he said. Maybe in the fall. And he said he thought he heard the door open and close. I said he kept sitting in his chair, but he just turned his head looking out that doorway to see if somebody had walked into the house. And sure enough, somebody or something had walked into the house. He said as he was watching the doorway, he saw a man walk past the doorway. The only thing was, it wasn't a complete man. All he saw of this man was from the waist down. He said he saw like a pair of pants and a pair of boots walk along past the doorway, and from where he sat you could see the stairs that went to the upstairs section of the house. And he said this ghostly figure just walked up the stairs and kept walking. And he said, of course, he jumped up and ran over there to see what it was. But by the time he got there and looked up the stairs, there wasn't anything to be seen. Now, this was the first time that they noticed that specter was seen in the house. I don't believe there was very many times that anything was actually seen in there. A lot was heard. A lot was done. Later on, a few years later, they had a daughter born, and one of the rooms that was always colder than the rest of the house. Now, they didn't have central air conditioning in this house at the time. They just had window units like in the bedroom and in the living room at this particular time. And this particular room that was right off their bedroom was always colder than any other room in the house. As a matter of fact, before their daughter was born, I have spent the night there with them. We would be like cooking out, or maybe we had gone somewhere like a concert or something, and we would all get back, and this room that was colder was always where I slept. It was a bedroom, but it was just right next door, and it had a doorway into their bedroom. But anyway, that's why they decided to make it the nursery whenever their daughter was born. Anyway, there didn't anything happen while their daughter was a baby in the nursery or anything. But after she got a little older and began to talk, one night they heard her laughing, and just like she was having a party and they're just having a big time. She was probably 2 years old at this time. Whenever they went in the room, they found her standing up in the baby bed holding on to the rail, and when they opened the door, she began saying, "Lights, lights." And sure enough, they could see a round ball of light was just going around and around the wall in the nursery at that particular time. Then it wasn't long after this happened till Big John and Jean were in their bedroom one night in bed, and they had both gone to sleep. And Jean said for some reason something just woke her up, as if somebody was standing over the bed watching her. And she said whenever she did wake up and good enough to where she could see pretty well, of course they had all the lights out and everything, but she could see this figure of a man standing over the bed looking down at him with his arms folded like this. And she didn't know who it was. Of course, she screamed whenever she saw this, and Big John woke up, and just as she did, then this specter that was standing at the foot of the bed just completely disappeared. And I believe he was seen another couple of times in the bedroom looking down over them whenever they were asleep. This would wake them up. You know, if you've ever been in the bed asleep and sound asleep, and somebody walks in, just goes looking at you, sometimes it will wake you up. You can feel that presence. But this was not a human person. This was a ghost of some type, or someone that was in their bedroom. Anyway, Jean thought she might recognize who this was, and she went back through some old pictures of the family. And although she had never seen her grandfather whenever she was little, because he died, I believe, whenever she was just an infant, that's who she identified this ghost as, was her grandfather. And her grandfather was one of the 13 people who had actually died inside this house over the years. They also, over this period of time, a lot of things would go missing, like for a day or two, like car keys. One time an umbrella went missing that they couldn't find. But several things, just little odds and end things, would go missing, and they would all turn back up on the island that was in the kitchen. That was the place that everything turned back up. Car key, reading glasses, eyeglasses, I mean, all kind of things in the house would, at one time or another, some little something would go missing. They would search and search and couldn't find it. Then 2 or 3 days later, it would appear on this little island that was in the kitchen. Anyway, that was some things that happened to them in this haunted house. And I'm going to tell you now what happened one night when I was down there. I had spent several nights in this house. Like I said, we would sometimes go to concerts or ball games, or just get together and cook out, like on maybe a Saturday or Sunday afternoon or whatever. It was wintertime, and they heated with wood. They had a real nice, real large wood heater in the living room that heated the whole house. As usual, whenever we started bed, Big John always commented, "We need to check these windows and doors 2 or 3 times because they like to come open during the night." Of course, he had an idea that ghosts there were opening them. So that's what he and I did. We locked everything and double checked it. I guess one went behind the other. Well, we all went to bed, I guess maybe 11 o'clock that night. I believe we had cooked out and watched the ball game that night. And so it was about 11 o'clock when we all decided to go to bed. They went in their bedroom, and I went in the cold bedroom. Along about 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke up about froze to death. I mean, I was cold, and you could feel wind coming across the bed. I was under cover, but still you could feel this ice cold wind coming through the house. So I got up and to see what was going on, and sure enough, both windows in this bedroom where I was were wide open. So I closed them, and about time that I slammed them down, I heard the front door slam. So I go out of the bedroom into the little hallway that adjoins where the front door is, and there was Big John closing the door and locking it again. The front door was open, the back door was open, and it had a side door on the house, and all were standing wide open. And every window in the house, which most of them were double windows, like windows side to side, as you can see in the picture, every window in the house was wide open, and it was, I know, below freezing that night. But anyway, we got the house warmed back up. we made another round through the house, and we closed, made sure windows were closed. The little locks on the or latches, whatever you call it, in the windows, we made sure those latches were turned. Big John at one time had even cut some 2x2 pieces of wood that would fit at the top of the window, so if you did manage to get the latch undone and tried to raise the window, that it wouldn't raise. And I remember we put those sticks or boards in the window to where you could not open it, because the stick would hold the bottom part of the window shut. And in several windows we put those sticks in there this time that we made around 3 o'clock that morning. It took us about an hour to get over the house, and because I mean it was freezing cold. It was way below freezing that night. Well, we go back to bed, and about an hour later I wake back up and I can hear Big John slamming windows again and doors. So I jump up again, and every door and every window in the house is open, even to the ones that we had put the little 2x2 boards in to keep them safely shut, to where you could not open them easily. Every window in the house was opened twice that night by somebody or something. After this, Jean got up after the second opening up of the house. She got up too, and we all just sat on up till daylight. And around 6 o'clock that morning, I decided it was time to come back home. And that was the last night that I spent in that house. It's a very haunted house. You can feel the presence in that bedroom that is ice cold. And I'm not sure who lives there now. I believe Big John's daughter lives there now, and I'm not sure if they've had any ghostly activity or whatever. But also, at this same location, when Big John and his wife Jean lived there, just on down the dirt road, the road in front of the house turns from pavement to a dirt road, and on down this dirt road about a mile and a half, not long after that, they had a UFO sighting and a UFO encounter, I guess you would call it, down there, and I want to do a video on that later on. But as I went down there yesterday and made pictures of the house and everything, I did notice a lot of Bigfoot signs out in the wood, but I didn't stop to make pictures of those, because when I came through White Plains, I had noticed that a lot of cotton had been planted down there, and it's been a long time since I had seen any cotton planted. And this was very good looking cotton. It was a very good looking cotton field. So I also made a little video of it to show you something that used to grow in Alabama, but I guess just doesn't hardly grow anywhere anymore. I guess the cotton days are over. But I do want to add that little video into this one tonight so you can see cotton actually growing in the state of Alabama. Even at one point I got out and walked on the side of the road and picked a bowl or whatever it's called. Here's another field, a large field. I was told, I believe by my grandfather, that it took 500 pounds of cotton to make a bale, and that was the way that they sold the bale back in Depression times, and when cotton was so largely grown here in Alabama. And now I'm going to attempt to do something that a lot of people claim they've done, but most of them, like other things, are just telling a lie. I'm going to pick cotton. There's my cotton ball or bowl or whatever it's called. And you can feel, you can actually feel the cotton seeds inside of it. And it would take a lot of this stuff to make 500 pounds. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed tonight's Alabama adventure, the house at the end of the road. And as I always do, I'd like to say hello to my granddaughter Madison. I would like to tell you that the Alabama Bigfoot Society is run completely out of pocket. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I hope you subscribe to the channel. With all that being said, we'll be looking for you next time on the next Alabama adventure.